Beneath the floorboards of a modest house in Edenton, North Carolina, a young woman lay perfectly still. The space was barely big enough to turn over, the air thick and still, and the wood pressed against her skin like the weight of a coffin. For 7 years, she hid there, watching through a small hole as her children played in the yard below, close enough to hear their laughter, but too far to hold them. Her name was Harriet Jacobs, and the story she left behind would become one of the most haunting, defiant, and courageous testaments to freedom ever written by an enslaved woman in America. She wrote of her early life.
I was born a slave, but I never knew it till 6 years of happy childhood had passed away. Harriet Jacobs.
For 6 fleeting years, Harriet's world was small and safe. Her parents, both enslaved but skilled and respected, shielded her from the brutality that defined so many other children's lives. Her grandmother, Molly Horniblow, was a formidable woman who ran a bakery and had managed to buy her own freedom. Harriet remembered her home smelling of fresh bread, her grandmother's hands always busy kneading dough, comforting, certain. But one day, everything changed. Her mother died, and the child who'd been gently taught to sew and read by her mistress was handed over to a new household, one ruled by Dr. James Norcom, a man she would call Dr. Flint in her autobiography. And with that transfer of ownership, Harriet's happy childhood ended.
But I now entered on my 15th year, a sad epoch in the life of a slave girl. My master began to whisper foul words in my ear. Young as I was, I could not remain ignorant of their import. Harriet Jacobs.
The torment was relentless. Dr. Norcom built a secluded cottage just for her, a prison disguised as luxury, meant for his control. Harriet resisted him in every way she could, but under slavery, refusal had consequences.
My owner sought in every way to render me miserable. He did not resort to corporal punishment, but to all the petty, tyrannical ways that human ingenuity could devise. Harriet Jacobs.
Harriet's choices were cruelly limited. If she resisted, she could be whipped, sold, or worse. If she submitted, she lost her dignity. So she made a decision that scandalized her readers when her autobiography was published decades later. She entered a relationship with another white man, Samuel Sawyer, wealthy, influential, and not her master.
There is something akin to freedom in having a lover who has no control over you, except that which he gains by kindness and attachment. Harriet Jacobs.
From that relationship, 2 children were born, Joseph and Louisa. For Harriet, their births brought both joy and terror.
When they told me my newborn babe was a girl, my heart was heavier than it had ever been before. Slavery is terrible for men, but it is far more terrible for women. Harriet Jacobs.
Dr. Norcom's rage only grew. He threatened to sell her children, to destroy the fragile world she'd built to protect them. Harriet realized there was only one way to keep them safe. She would have to disappear. And so she did. In 1835, Harriet vanished from the Norcom estate. For months, he searched, furious, posting rewards, interrogating neighbors.
$100 reward will be given for the apprehension and delivery of my servant girl, Harriet. She is a light mulatto, 21 years of age, about 5 feet 4 inches high, of a thick and corpulent habit, having on her head a thick covering of black hair that curls naturally, but which can be combed straight. She speaks easily and fluently, and has an agreeable carriage and address. Being a good seamstress, she has been accustomed in dress well, has a variety of very fine clothes, made in the prevailing fashion, and will probably appear if abroad, tricked out in gay and fashionable finery. As this girl absconded from the plantation of my son without any known cause or provocation, it is probable she designs to transport herself to the north. The above reward, with all reasonable charges, will be given for apprehending her or securing her in any prison or jail within the United States. All persons are hereby forewarned against harboring or entertaining her, or being in any way instrumental in her escape, under the most rigorous penalties of the law. James Norcom.
But she was closer than anyone could have guessed. Hidden inside a crawl space above her grandmother's porch, 9 feet long, 7 feet wide, and only 3 feet high, Harriet lay in near darkness.
The air was stifling. The darkness total. A bed had been spread on the floor. I could sleep quite comfortably on one side, but the slope was so sudden that I could not turn on the other without hitting the roof. The rats and mice ran over my bed, but I was weary, and I slept such sleep as the wretched may when a tempest has passed over them. Morning came. I knew it only by the noises I heard, for in my small den, day and night were all the same. I suffered for air even more than for light, but I was not comfortless. I heard the voices of my children, Harriet Jacobs.
Through a tiny peephole she drilled between the boards, she watched her children play. She could hear their voices, sometimes even their tears, when they wondered where their mother had gone.
I succeeded in making one hole about an inch long and an inch broad. I sat by it till late into the night to enjoy the little whiff of air that floated in. In the morning, I watched for my children. The first person I saw in the street was Dr. Flint. I had a shuddering, superstitious feeling that it was a bad omen. Several familiar faces passed by. At last, I heard the merry laugh of children, and presently, 2 sweet little faces were looking up at me as though they knew I was there and were conscious of the joy they imparted. How I longed to tell them I was there. Harriet Jacobs.
For 7 years, she stayed there. 7 years without standing upright. 7 years without seeing the sun. She endured storms, fever, hunger, and solitude, all while her master continued to search for her, still convinced she must be hiding in the north. Then, in 1842, she finally made her escape. Hidden aboard a vessel bound for Philadelphia, Harriet Jacobs stepped onto free soil. But freedom in name did not mean safety. The fugitive slave law loomed over her, and bounty hunters roamed the streets. Even in the North, she lived in fear.
I had but one hesitation, and that was my feeling of insecurity in New York, now greatly increased by the passage of the fugitive slave law. Harriet Jacobs.
Eventually, she found refuge in the home of the abolitionist Quaker Amy Post in Rochester, New York, where she became part of a growing circle of reformers, including Frederick Douglass. Harriet worked as a nursemaid, saved her wages, and continued to dream of a life where she could claim herself fully. When her book, Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl, was published in 1861 under the pseudonym Linda Brent, it was unlike any slave narrative that had come before. Written by a woman about the inner world of women in bondage, it broke every convention of polite society. Some readers doubted it was even real. A woman's open discussion of sexual exploitation, motherhood, and resistance was almost unthinkable in Victorian America. But her friend and editor, the writer Lydia Maria Child, vouched for her authenticity. And Harriet's words spoke for themselves: raw, unflinching, unforgettably human.
No pen can give an adequate description of the all-pervading corruption produced by slavery. The slave girl is reared in an atmosphere of licentiousness and fear. The lash and the foul talk of her master and his sons are her teachers. When she is 14 or 15, her owner or his sons or the overseer, or perhaps all of them, begin to bribe her with presents. If these fail to accomplish their purpose, she is whipped or starved into submission to their will. She may have had religious principles inculcated by some pious mother or grandmother, or some good mistress. She may have a lover whose good opinion and peace of mind are dear to her heart, or the profligate men who have power over her may be exceedingly odious to her, but resistance is hopeless. Harriet Jacobs.
After the Civil War, Harriet didn't stop. She turned her attention to helping newly freed people in the South, organizing aid and opening schools for Black refugees in Savannah and later in Washington, D.C. Her letters from that period show the same spirit that carried her through her years of hiding. Hope amid hardship. In one letter to a friend, she wrote,
I do not regret my sufferings, save for their long duration. They have strengthened me for the work that still lies before me. Harriet Jacobs.
By the time she died in 1897, Harriet Jacobs had lived several lives: an enslaved child, a hunted fugitive, an author, a mother, and a humanitarian. Buried next to her daughter in Cambridge, Massachusetts, her headstone simply reads, "Patient in tribulation, fervent in spirit serving the Lord." But perhaps her truest epitaph is the one she wrote herself in the final pages of her book.
Reader, my story ends with freedom, not in the usual way with marriage. I and my children are now free. We are as free from the power of slaveholders as are the white people of the North. And though that, according to my ideas, is not saying a great deal, it is a vast improvement in my condition. Harriet Jacobs.
In those words, Harriet Jacobs claimed for herself and for generations after her, not just freedom, but authorship, motherhood, and memory. And from the tiny garret where she once hid in silence, her voice still echoes, strong, clear, and utterly unbroken. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel, where we will bring you a new story each week.